Hey, this is Sanyam Bhutani, and you're listening to Chai Time Data Science, a podcast for data science enthusiasts where I interview practitioners, researchers, and Kagglers about their journey, experience, and talk all things about data science. Hello and welcome to another episode of the Chai Time Data Science Show. In this interview, I am really honored to be talking to the king of Kaggle Discussions and twice Grandmaster CPMP, Dr. John Francois Puget, for the second time. So I've already interviewed him on the blog post series. Do check that interview out in case you're interested. This interview really picks off where the previous one had ended, so I'd highly suggest that you check it out. Grandmaster was kind enough to talk all about his journey in machine learning and Kaggle in that interview. Dr. Puget is a distinguished engineer at IBM and technical leader for IBM AI toolchain offerings. In this interview, we talk specifically about the IEEE-CIS fraud detection Kaggle competition, where CPMP's team, titled Two Uncles and Three Puppies, finished second on the competition. We discuss Grandmaster's approach to Kaggle competitions, this one in particular, and even more so in general, their team's solution, as well as talk more about his Kaggle experience. So we cover a few points that were missing from the blog interview. I'd like to thank people who submitted the questions via the EMA section, and of course to the Grandmaster for agreeing to do it. For now, here's my interview with twice Grandmaster and king of Kaggle Discussions, CPMP, Dr. John Francois Puget. Please enjoy the show. Hi everyone, welcome to this episode. I am on the call with one of my machine learning heroes who's been kind enough to come on the show for the second time, Dr. John Francois Puget, king of Kaggle Discussions. Thank you so much for joining me again on the interview series.
Thank you for inviting me for the second time.
It's really an honor. Before we talk all about your gold solution and second position finish on the IEEE competition, could you help us set the stage by giving us an overview of the competition and what was the quote-unquote challenge here?
Yeah, so it was a fraud detection competition, credit card fraud detection. So we're given a bunch of information about credit card transactions collected by a company called Vestas. So it's important to understand that Vestas is not a card issuer. It's not Visa, it's not American Express, etc. So we have they don't have access to all the information about cards. So they gave us information collected from different sources. And for many reasons, the data was obfuscated. So we didn't know what the data was really about, except for a few exceptions. For instance, credit card number was truncated to the first 6 digits, if I remember well. So, and hashed, so we don't have the credit card number anyway, even the first 6 digits. So working with anonymized data is always a problem. It prevents some feature engineering based on common sense. So that's what we had. And we had to predict if, for the test data, we had to predict if a given transaction is a fraud or not. So that was the thing. And very quickly, we all tried to identify which transaction belonged to the same card, because a way to detect fraud detection, and I've worked on a real use case, is to compare the current transaction with history and try to find anomaly. So that's what we all did, try to recognize card numbers from the data.
Got it. In the previous interview, you had mentioned that you are sort of selective with the competitions that you enter. You look for challenging ones where you get something new to learn. So, what made you pick this competition particularly, and why did it seem interesting to you?
Yeah, it's true that for me, Kaggle is a learning resource. So that's why I do Kaggle competition, and I always tend to pick competitions where I'm not good at the start, I would say. This one, this said, was a bit different. In a previous competition, after a competition, I often like to review and discuss with people who did well.
Mhm.
And one person did well in a previous competition, and we said, oh, maybe we should team next time. Okay. And so Sergey Bryansky invited me to join this competition before I entered and even before I completed the previous one.
Mhm.
So I said, okay, give me a few days after, I would think about it. And separately, I had discussed with Gilberto Titerix. We have teamed several times in the past, and we said we would team in the next competition. And I was really tired, and I looked at this IEEE competition, and it looked a bit, it looked hard. It's time series. Time series are very difficult. To me, they are the most difficult competitions.
Mhm.
And yeah, predicting future is hard, huh? Right? So it's so I was not sure I would enter. I was tired, but between discussion with Jiba and Sergey, I said, okay, I should join.
Mhm.
But I waited a long time, and I joined like 2 days before the deadline for entering, which is unusually late for me. So it was more because I was invited this time than willing to learn, really.
Right.
So it's a bit of an exception
Okay.
to my general approach. But I did learn. I did learn stuff.
Did you find the problem challenging enough? And I think this was your 24th medaling competition. Was it also related to your earlier learnings from other competitions?
Yeah, so I found this competition to be very difficult because it reminded me of previous competition, Malware, where I did well, but which was a disaster for a lot of people.
Me
Uh,
included.
yeah, so because the test data is different in many ways from the trained data. So the key in these competitions is to either remove differences between trained and test data or build models that generalize very well. And both are difficult. So I thought this competition would be very similar to malware, but in fact, not so much. The data is different, but it's not different the same way it was as in malware. So I was expecting a much larger shakeup than the one that happened. It was challenging because I think, I can't prove it, that the cards used in train are disjoint from the cards used in test.
Okay.
So it's easy to overfit in train if you build too much your model on known cards,
Mhm.
because it won't transfer easily to test. So that was my approach, not to rely too much on specific card numbers.
Okay.
So I believe some people did still, which explained the shakeup, that it was a minor shakeup, but there was a shakeup still.
I'd also love to know the story behind the team name. So your team was titled Two Uncles and Three Puppies.
Yeah, so first, so there was this team of 3 Russians, including Sergey. They were called three old MIPT guys, I think. So MIPT is a high-end university in Russia. M stands for Moscow. Moscow. So I don't know the detail, but it looks like a top university in Russia.
Okay.
So 3 guys from that university teamed. and they were in a good place. Then when I decided to join, I said, well, I'm teaming with Jiba. Can we join? And they said, sure, of course. And they renamed the team. They didn't ask me. So what I can explain is Uncle. I'm called Uncle on Kaggle forums. It started with, I believe, a person from China who called me Uncle after I gave some advice.
Okay.
And Uncle in China is a mark of respect. So it's like an old wise man, you know, I have a white beard a bit, so I'm older than most Kagglers. So it's kind of respect for someone more experienced and older. So now I'm known Uncle. And Jiba was not named Uncle until this, but he deserves it. He has been a top Kagler for a long period, and he's still he's still near the top. So he also has mentored and helped a lot of people. So I think he deserved this Uncle as well. Then why the puppies? Maybe they felt a bit overwhelmed by us, but they shouldn't. The three old MIP guys are very strong people. So they decided to call themselves puppies.
Okay.
I think they are not puppies.
That's an interesting story. Also, you mentioned you joined the competition, I believe 10 days before the original closing deadline. How were your first go-to steps for this competition, maybe in comparison to your usual?
I always have a similar workflow. First, I look at data and clean it. So Kaggle is different from real life because data is already cleaned and curated, but still. So my first step was to look at the difference between train and test.
Mm-hmm.
And I filtered out features that were too different. So I got rid of maybe half of the features right away because they had too many values in test not appearing in train, like the type of device used, you know, the mobile phone type or new types that are in test and not in train. So I removed them. The second one is I always spend a lot of time on setting up a cross-validation setting because I rely on cross-validation as I do in real-life machine learning. Too many people on Kaggle rely on the public leaderboard. It is okay if the public and private leaderboard are very similar. Public and private test data are very similar.
Right.
But in time series, they are not. So it's not because you do well in predicting next month that you do well in predicting 6 months away. And that's what we were facing.
Yeah.
So I tried to replicate the need to predict far away in my cross-validation. So I thought a lot about it. And reading the other top teams' write-ups, the ones who did well had a similar approach, time-based cross-validation and long, and for some folds, a very long delay between the train and the validation data. So that's the second step, cross-validation. Then I did feature selection and parameter tuning. I started with LightGBM, which is my almost always the default I'm starting with.
Yep.
On tabular data at least, because it's fast. It's faster than XGBoost. Not that much anymore. XGBoost has made progress, but it uses way less memory. So it's a good starting point. And then I did some feature engineering. And then so this happened quite quickly, actually, and that's when I teamed. And when I teamed, I was expecting my teammates to have worked on identifying card, transaction belonging to the same card, and they did. So I just borrowed the the transaction chains that they identified, added them to my data set. But again, I didn't want to use the credit card. So each chain is like a credit card number.
Right.
I didn't use them directly as feature because I thought it would not carry over to test. I rather built lag features that represent the past. So at any time, I wanted to have features that summarize the past use of the card. That's how banks detect fraud in practice. So that's what I did. And this brought me, it was a bit of a surprise to me, but this brought me in gold region like in 2 days. So I benefited from my team features, but it was a good surprise. And then I worked with them trying to add diversity. So not do the same feature engineering that they did. And then Jiba blended the modules together.
Got it. To linger on to cross-validation for a little longer, during a previous interview also you had mentioned that this essentially unbounds you from the 5 submissions. So if you could maybe also give a few general cross-validation tips, and specifically how did you set up?
Yeah, so you should try to create your cross-validation setting to be as close as possible as a trend test split of the Kaggle data. So for instance, in this case, we had a 2-month delay between the trend data and the test data. So in my cross-validation, I put a 1-month delay between each trend data and validation data. And the trend data was before the validation data each time.
Mm-hmm.
So that to be similar to test where there is a lag. Why not 2 months? Because then it would remove too much of trending data. So it's always, you cannot always replicate exactly the trend test split because you have less data, but you try to approach. I also try to see if my cross-validation score evolves as the public leaderboard. So public leaderboard could be considered as one fold. It's okay to use it as one extra fold. It's not okay to only use the public leaderboard in my view. So I try also to see, as you mentioned, we have a limited number of submissions. So I try to see if I can just ignore the public leaderboard score. So each time I submit, I look at the correlation between my cross-validation score and the public leaderboard. And if I see that both evolve the same way, a better cross-validation score results in a better leaderboard score up to some noise, then I'm very happy, and I just basically ignore on the leaderboard.
Got it.
So in here, it was almost the case.
Okay. There's a question from the AMA section by Andres Turubia. I think you already answered it on the forums, but I'll just repeat it for a quick answer.
Yeah.
In some tabular competitions, data is purposely obfuscated to prevent privacy leaks, etc. And the main key in such competitions becomes unobfuscating the data, which no longer seems to be a machine learning problem. Is that your experience with this competition?
So I have a strong disagreement. So this is a prevailing view that Vestas obfuscated card IDs. And I expressed my view in the forum. I disagree. I don't think Vestas has a card IDs. Vestas is not the card issuer.
Okay.
So I'm sure Vestas did, as we did, they tried to chain transactions and blah, 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 blah. But I'm not convinced they have full card ID. So I'm not sure they obfuscated that, really. The second hypothesis I made is if they obfuscated, maybe they wanted us to explore and see, and they want to see if we can come up with better ways of detecting card IDs or users. So I think it was of value for them to either obfuscate the card IDs or just they don't have them. But the view, people say it's a leak. No, it's not a leak. The organizer from Vestas said clearly that if a credit card has fraudulent transactions, then all following transactions are marked as fraud.
Yep.
It was clear, it was said. So using that property is not a leak to me. A leak is when information is contained, say, in trend data or test data that gives you information about the target, but without they give unintended information about the target. So it's a mistake.
Right.
Here it was not a mistake. So it's a fundamental property of how transactions are labeled as fraud or not. So I disagree, but I may be the only one among those who wrote about it in the forum to defend this position. Everybody else says, oh, it was just a matter of finding a leak. And I believe it's a major mistake in how to approach a machine learning problem. In machine learning problem, you want to use properties of the data to predict.
Right.
So to me, it's feature engineering. And creating card transaction chains is just feature engineering. So if you see it as feature engineering, it's part of machine learning. The person who asked a bit about it is a specialist of deep learning, where and deep learning specialist tends to say, oh, we don't do feature engineering, we let the model learn. But so deep learning is great at indeed learning features.
Yep.
But I don't see how current deep learning technology can identify those transaction chains. So it was a bit of when the only way to do well is to really do feature engineering, deep learning people are at disadvantage. So maybe that's why he said it's not really machine learning. To me, it's machine learning. It's feature engineering.
Okay. The second question from him is, any ideas why neural networks were harder to fit than boosting algorithms? You've already answered that, but I want to linger onto that. Since our previous interview, which was almost a year ago, your opinion on GBMs hasn't changed. You still say they are your go-to.
Yeah.
I'd like to poke more on that thought. And what are your thoughts in terms of both industrial use cases as well for neural nets versus GBMs?
So first, GBMs are more recognized than at the time in industry, especially XGBoost, who was the first modern one. So lots of companies already use XGBoost in production. Like GBM is coming, CatBoost a bit, especially in Russia, but it's spreading also. So deep learning is great, but, and this is a major but, deep learning requires a lot of data.
Yep.
So especially in tabular data, if you have, I don't remember how many examples we had, but let's say you have 10K examples. This is small for deep learning. And the problem of deep learning is that it will either you use a very simple model and it does not learn much, or you use a more complex model and it overfits very rapidly. No, it's very brittle. So if you look at deep learning success, for instance, on image problems, ImageNet has 12 million images. Then making a model overfit on it is harder. I think now top models overfit to it, but that's a separate discussion. When you have 10K samples, it's difficult. So you could say, oh, I will use transfer learning. I take a pre-trained model, and then I would just have it learn a bit more on my specific samples. It works well on images. The problem is for tabular data, what would be a pre-trained model? It's not clear at this point. So transfer learning is not an option. So that's a general answer. The particular answer for this competition is what I just said, the transaction chains. I don't see how a deep learning model could learn them. Or just writing code to find them directly is more effective, I would say.
Got it. I'm a fan of your write-ups. I'm sure everyone in the Kaggle community is. One of the ones that I particularly really liked was Becoming Adults. That's specific to this competition. And you're of course passionate about the field and Kaggle. You're active in the discussion. But what's your advice on keeping a professional connection, as you said in the topic, with
Yeah.
Kaggle?
So this post, I was sure it would please people from Asia. You, for instance, from India or China, there is a very long history of between Buddhism and other religions to be or philosophy to step back a bit from life agitation and look at what's essential. I would say in Western countries, in the US in particular, people are running all the time, and so you step back. And in this competition, I was seeing people getting mad because of a 2-day extension.
Yep.
If you think of it at life scale, 2 days, what is it, frankly? But I saw people getting mad and so emotional. And it reminded me of an episode of where I went the same way. I was very emotionally invested in Kaggle. I was on a competition, entered, and within 2 or 3 days, I was at the top. And at the time, I was not a Grandmaster. So I thought maybe I can win solo. I was so excited, blah, blah. And then they reset the competition because there was a mistake in data preparation that I was exploiting. So all my efforts were just wiped. I got mad. I read rules. I read online to see how I could sue Kaggle.
Okay.
For breaching a contract. It went to this. I was mad. I said I would never compete again, blah, blah, blah. And well, after 1 or 2 weeks, I cooled down. And I say, okay, I won't ever be in the same state. So now when I compete, well, I invest time, energy, but it's not a matter of death or life anymore.
Got
it's not. It's not a love story that can become a hate story. It's just a professional activity, a hobby, a learning experience, but it's not the most important thing. And so I just shared this experience in this blog post, in this forum post, and yeah. Now it's and sometimes it's even it's harder to get motivated, but I sleep better. Better.
To talk about how you invest your time, how do you balance your work life Kaggle, and how do you decide how much time you will dedicate while working on any competition generally?
The problem is I always end up using more time than I planned. So,
Okay.
but first, I can do some Kaggling on my work time because it's, as I said, a learning experience. So it's a way to know about state-of-the-art practice. And as a result, I'm working on machine learning tooling for IBM. So what I learn on Kaggle is useful directly in my work. So I can do some Kaggling, but I can't do it full time by any means, or even, well, I can work a couple of hours, let's say, on Kaggle on average, which is good already. but I need to work evenings and weekends on top. I don't think you can consistently get gold medals by working 2 hours a day on a Kaggle competition. I think we can do silver 2 hours a day, so maybe that's good enough for a lot of people. But when I enter competition, I really target gold now for good or bad reason. So I need to. That's why I don't enter that many competitions, because I really want to do seriously. So first, I don't do more than one at a time.
Okay.
That's the first thing. I see people entering 4 competitions. You may see me entering 4 competitions, but just to download the data and play a bit, but I focus on one at a time. So basically, I try to do a bit of work before going to work in the morning, especially usually prepare experiments that would run throughout the day. I check on them from time to time at work, or relaunch some if possible, if I can access. And then in the evening, depending on the experiments, I will submit. I will prepare another set of experiments to run during the night. The key is to make the machine run 24 hours a day. I cannot spend 24 hours a day, but the machine can. It's very important. And then I have a comprehensive wife. No kids at home, so I can spend quite a lot of time still.
Got it. Now, coming back to the competition, I'd really love to know, how do you distribute your workflow across your team? So you already teamed up with Jiba in the past, but how do you distribute your work in a team, and how do you document or track all your experiments?
So I believe that it's better to let people do what they want to do first. Even if I don't think it will work, someone motivated to do something is way more efficient than someone working on something they don't believe in. So if I tell a less experienced teammate, oh, you should do this instead of what you want to do, usually it won't work. So I try to when I team with Jiba, he's more experienced than me, so of course this does not apply. But with less experienced people, especially those who team because they want to learn from me, quote unquote, I let them make their experiments. But if they fail, I force them to learn from it. Why did it? Once I say I have doubt because of this. If the experiments fail and it proves I was right, then I want them to really agree I was right. Not because I want to be right, but because there was a reason why the experiment fails. It's very important that machine learning is an experimental science. Data science is an experimental science, like physics. So I really conceive the work making hypotheses, for instance, maybe features around this would improve. Testing the hypothesis using cross-validation, and then looking at the result and learning. It's very important that you use an experimental point of view. People with preconceived ideas, I should use this, whatever the problem. Sometimes they can be lucky, but you really have to be open. And if you're convinced something will work and then data shows it does not, you should not insist. Sometimes I'm guilty of that. So that's how I spend my time. Spreading work between teammates, encourage people to say what they want to work on, so that we avoid duplicates if possible. And also to share when they do something that did not work. And this is surprisingly difficult. In many cases, in my previous time, so I share when I try something that fails. I say, okay, I tried this, it didn't work. And then someone says, I tried it also, and it didn't work. Well, if that person had shared the info, it would have saved me time.
Right.
So it's very important in teaming to share experiments, whether they are successful or not. People tend to only share what works. But no, you should share what does not work, because
Definitely.
you can learn from it. But so, and I say it each time, but sometimes people just, I don't know,
Hmm.
they are afraid of what I could think, or I don't know. So that's why I share my failures, and given it happens every day, it's easier.
Got it. Now, finally, I'd love to know more about your solution. It might be a little technical, so if you could just give a very high overview of the second position winning competition and the decision-making process behind what made it to the competition versus all your experiments.
All right, so I've described the cross-validation setting. The key, again, was to identify, well, first to have a good set of features in general. So feature selection was important. Vestas provided feature debut that were very predictive. So if you look with a little feature engineering and tuning, you could reach at least 0.9 or 94% rock AUC. So it's a good score.
Mhm.
Moving from 94 to 96 and gold, you needed to work on card IDs.
Right.
So my teammates did the work. They to identify them, what they did was to use scatter plot,
Mhm.
where you had time on one dimension and the feature values on the other dimension. And for some features, you were seeing straight lines growing as time goes,
Okay.
straight. So these were transaction chains.
Mhm.
And then the work was to capture these via features. A lot of teams try to hard code the property that if a transaction in a transaction is a 1, then the following ones are fraud. So they implemented post-processing procedures directly.
Right.
It gives good result, but it overfits because our transaction chains are not perfect.
Mhm.
So what we did instead was to create features representing what we believe are each transaction chain, and then either use these features directly. So my teammates used CatBoost, which is good at categorical features directly. I prefer to use each to create what we call lag variables representing the previous transaction in a transaction chain, like the average of previous transaction, the variance. Same for the time intervals. My idea was to capture if you are a fraudster and you get a credit card number,
Right.
then you want to use it as much as possible in the smallest amount of time before the fraud is detected. Not too much, because banks also look for this pattern, so it's a balance, but the idea was to see if an acceleration in the rate that transaction happen are playing a role. Same, when you're fraudster and you're lazy, you will repeat transactions. So the variance should decrease because you will always use the same amount. So that's why variance of transaction is predictive in my view. So I added this kind of features. I
Got it.
also used a technique called target encoding.
Mhm.
So in target encoding, you basically replace a value by the average of the target for sample having this value. But you have to do it in a careful way because it's too good of a feature. It leads to overfitting. So,
Okay.
and I explained in the competition forum, I use nested fault target encoding, something that people don't use usually. Well,
Mhm.
some grandmasters do, and I've seen some code like that in their solutions. But in the average Kaggler doesn't understand why you have to be very cautious about leaking information. That's why we use nested faults. So, and with this, I went to 96%. My teammates are specialists of CatBoost, and I never used it before. And CatBoost is different from XGBoost and IGBM. It really handles category calls quite well. And in my case, target encoding was helping IGBM, but it was detrimental to CatBoost. So it means CatBoost has built-in ways of doing target encoding that are better in that case, at least. So I will use CatBoost some more in the next competition. So then what many top teams had a similar approach than ours, and yet we finished second. So what did we do different? I believe we have more diversity between JIBA models, my models, and the Russian models, I would say. Second point is we really cared about removing features that could lead to overfitting. So with the cross-validation setting, it was easy to see if a model was bad at long-term prediction. So these were discarded. Secondly, Sergey and his colleagues on the Russian side, they had a score that was making a distinction between the score on transactions that were on the same chain than on trace data, on trend data, and transactions that only belong to chains occurring in test. So this way, they were checking that their model was not good just because it was overfitting on train. So overfitting is a danger in machine learning and in Kaggle competition. So we had several, we were afraid of it all along. So I believe that's why our model generalized a bit better than other teams.
Got it. To talk about the computing resource that your team used, could you speak to that? This question comes because there's this prevailing sentiment that you absolutely need a huge amount of setup to perform nicely.
I have, in this, I used a machine. It's a larger machine than many, but still, it's a 64 gigabyte machine, 20 core Xeon at 2.4 gigahertz. So it's by no means a top-end current machine. On cloud, you can get better VMs very easily. Yes, but 20 core means you scale an IGBM or XGBoost nicely. But if you have a recent GPU, say a 1080 Ti or more recent, you can run XGBoost or CatBoost as fast. So a modern GPU or a multi-core machine is interesting. But regarding the computing power, we should not overestimate it still. Good modeling beats good hardware. And in the previous competition in talking data, I finished 6th solo on the same machine, 64 gigabytes. The top team, they used a VM on Amazon of 1.8 terabytes.
Wow.
And they used, I don't know how many features. I used only 48 features. So, no, I mean, we should not overestimate. On tabular data, on image processing, if you have 16 recent GPUs instead of one, you do 16 times more experiments, or you train your model 16 times faster. It makes a big difference. But as soon as you have, say, so what I recommend, if you can afford, is 2 recent. So 2 GPUs with more than 10 gigabytes, 1080 Ti or better.
Mm-hmm.
You have two, and a good CPU. A high-end gaming PC would do the job. And that's what I would recommend today if you want to own the hardware. The other option is, as many, is to use cloud resource, cloud VMs. So there are numbers. Kaggle notebooks is one, but it's not the only one.
GCP provides some credit still at the time of recording for signing up.
Yeah, and so yes, if you want, if you're competing for gold, hardware will make a big difference.
Right.
If you want silver, you don't need to have top-end hardware at this point. But I don't know. It will evolve if maybe silver will be hard without good hardware. I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think it is the case for now.
Got it. Now, coming to discussions, we all know you're the king of Kaggle discussions. I'd really love to know why you do it. Why do you answer questions, share your ideas? Why not just keep all your ideas to yourself, keep winning competitions?
Yeah, so I believe in the past I missed gold in few competitions because I shared too much.
Mm-hmm.
So I share less now, to be honest. And I observed the second most popular on forum, Chris Diotti.
Right.
He is going the same way. In one of his first competition, he shared so much that he missed the gold. But I would say 80% of the gold medals were just building on his sharing. So he's sharing less as well, and he's getting gold. So it's a balance. So I tend to share now more methodology advice or hints. I don't, and I'm against people who share ready-to-use code. You just even have to, you just fork, run, submit, and you get a good score.
Mm-hmm.
This is not helping people. Maybe you get medals, but for your kernel. But what is the help you give? There is a saying: it's better to teach someone to fish, catch fish, than giving them fish.
That's true.
Well, so it's the same. So I'm trying to help people catch fish rather than giving them the fish. So I give hints. I give hints and I give methodology advice, like work on cross-validation. Don't trust public LB, or don't trust. For instance, I gave an advice about public notebooks. Never use public notebook output as is. Just and look if the public notebook has a cross-validation or at least a trend test split. If they don't, then it means the author adjusted whatever is in the notebook based on the public leaderboard score, which is the best recipe to overfit, I know. So I gave this advice. I think it was good advice because the best notebook was really bad on the private leaderboard in this competition. So, and then some people ask specific question. I don't know why. I feel I have to answer. I like helping people. I consider teaching as a profession at university, but I'm not good at so I'm good at writing educational content, but teaching is speaking, and I'm not good there. I lose patience. People don't understand. Whereas in writing, first you can rewrite, polish. And if people don't understand, you don't know. I mean, unless they complain on the forum. So I don't know. So I like writing, I blog. I like writing Kaggle forum indeed.
Got it. Another thing that I learned from you is as you mentioned, you also spend a lot of time after the competition ends discussing things. Why not just go on a vacation with the prize money? Why spend the time understanding other solutions?
Because this is where you can learn. Your competitors, especially in the top teams, often share what they did. So they write their main ideas, not always, but very often. So you can learn from what they did. You can also use late submission to submit things you did not have time or did not have the submission left.
Do you also try late submissions after the
Yes,
competition?
yes, yes, yes.
Okay.
On this one, so given I joined late and we were a 5-people team, I could get 1 or maybe 2 submissions. So I think all in all, I've submitted maybe 15 times only in this competition.
Okay.
So there are things I could not try. I think less than 15. So after I tried, and some things were indeed very interesting, some didn't work. So yes, I do a bit of late submission. I read all the write-ups, all.
Okay.
And I ask questions if I need.
Got
And
it.
I'm surprised so many people after competition just run to the next one and they don't try to learn. I don't know why. And even I've seen people trying to share their solution before the end. Oh, people won't read if I share after. Oh, well, so what? Yeah.
Got it. So my last question to you would be: in the previous interview, you gave your best advices for someone starting machine learning. What would be your best advice for someone just starting on Kaggle, looking to compete in competitions?
So first, practice Python. It's not the only language you can use. You can use R, but it's easier to learn, I would say, and you find a lot of machine learning packages with Python. So practice Python a bit, and then enter. Take some course. So I like Andrew Ng machine learning course on Coursera. So the Stanford machine learning course, not his deep learning course.
Okay.
Second, don't start with deep learning unless all you care about is images or natural language processing. Start with scikit-learn. Read scikit-learn tutorial so that you have an overview of the algorithms. And experiment with XGBoost or LightGBM. And then enter Kaggle Playground or Getting Started competition on Kaggle. Practice. I see people who go from course to course, so they have all the badges and certifications you can imagine. But this course, except Andrew Ng, that's why I recommend it, they don't have much methodology content.
Right.
And you only understand the methodology when you practice. My first competition on Kaggle, or second, first, I believe. So I thought I would do well. I have a PhD in machine learning, well, from a long time ago, but still, I followed some course to refresh. I said I would fare well. You would see what you would see. And I lost like 2,000 ranks between public and private leaderboard.
Okay.
So I said, oh, I need to learn. And I really tried to understand what I did wrong. What I did wrong was no cross-validation. And so I learned. It's only when you try, you fail, you learn, you try, you fail, you learn. And after a while, you've learned enough so that you don't fail anymore. That's how you should go.
Got it. This has been an amazing interview. Before we end the call, what would be the best platforms to follow you and follow your work?
Kaggle, Kaggle
Kaggle.
forum. I have a blog on IBM, but I just learned they are sunsetting the platform. So I will relocate somewhere. I don't know yet where. but no, Kaggle forum, Kaggle competition forum write-ups from top teams to me are very, very interesting. Some notebooks are very good. Then there are various blogs or first your own blog series and video blog. No, it's interesting. You enter. I'm not the only good Kaggler you're interviewing, and you go beyond Kaggling. So no, it's a good source. It's not because you're from India, but I find Analytics Vidya, is that how you pronounce it?
Yeah, I think so.
Very interesting. It's a good, very good introductory material. You don't need to know a lot before reading these. Towards Data Science also has interesting blogs. KD Nuggets. I'm very cautious. And then if you want to be more technical, reading papers and archive, so research papers. But for this, it's better to have ways to filter. There are so many publications. So I'm on various Slack channels like Kaggle Nodes.
Yep.
Find a community where you can share and learn about new cool stuff. The problem in this space is there's too much information for consuming all of it. So you have to be careful. So I read a bit on general purpose, as I said, and then I enter, as we said at the start, enter Kaggle competition in fields I don't know, so that I know between what I will experiment and what Kagglers will share, I will know state of the art. So I'm looking for the next NLP competition to get a refresher, for instance.
Okay.
So.
Got it. Thank you so much, CPMP, for doing this interview and for all of your amazing contributions to the community.
And thank you for your blog and video blog. This is very interesting.
Thank you so much.
I read all and watch all of them.
Wow, thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Thank you so much for listening to this episode. If you enjoyed the show, please be sure to give it a review or feel free to shoot me a message. You can find all of the social media links in the description. If you like the show, please subscribe and tune in each week to Chai Time Data Science.